Right, this is my third video on the 20th, Sunday the 20th of February 2022. I don't think I actually, on my last video, just down the road in Bradfield there, I'm now up at Agden Reservoir. And you can see how this is gushing over the top. And you might notice, anybody who's watched the national news and takes notice of any of the pictures that they use on the BBC national news in the UK may recognise this view, because they've used this summer shot of this on numerous occasions. So I say this is Agden Reservoir in the Peak District, on the edge of beautiful Bradfield. High Bradfield is in the distance up there. Yeah, but just, I don't think I got to my point regarding reservoirs on my last video. I ended up talking about trees and how planting more trees in winter will not solve flooding. In fact, it will probably make flooding worse during the winter months because of what I said on the last video. But I want to talk about the reservoirs, because this seems to be a big advantage in Sheffield. As I say, we have several reservoirs that surround the city, and they're all in the higher part of Sheffield. They surround the city to the west and to the north mainly. And I've thought this for a long time, but if managed properly, you can use the capacity within these reservoirs to help, to use it basically as a flood alleviation plan, to actually help alleviate the flooding further down in lower parts of Sheffield and further out in Rotherham and Doncaster, etc. Now, as I said before, January we had one of the driest Januaries on record. 3 weeks ago, Danflass, and I watch the reservoirs. I come and visit this area literally several times a week, while ever I can, and so I'm always observing the reservoirs and what level they're at, etc. And as I say, about 3 weeks ago, Danflass was about a metre below overflowing. Agden Reservoir 3 weeks ago had been overflowing a little bit, nothing too much, and then dropping back a few inches from overflowing, and then maybe a foot or so from overflowing. But my point is that if we have really, really good, quite accurate, and accurate I'm talking about 80 to 90% plus accuracy of long-range weather forecasts, and by long range I mean 10 days plus, and we know that there is a high chance of several storm systems coming in to this part, and specifically I'm talking about the Sheffield region now, actually coming into the Sheffield region, and there's 80 to 90% or 80% plus chance that there is going to be major rain dropping in this area over several weeks, or certainly several days, if not several weeks. Then to me it seems reasonable that the government should be able to mandate a reservoir, the reservoirs owned by Yorkshire Water or any other water company around the country, to drop their levels before the rain comes in. So if you know that in 10 days time or 7 days or 5 days there's going to be a major rain event, most of these reservoirs obviously have an outlet, so that the outlet, especially Danflass, which is actually specifically designed, I mean the three dams up here, Agden, Dale Dyke and Strines, are specifically to provide water for the city. Danflass doesn't provide water for the city. Danflass is basically a reservoir. It's a reserve of water that keeps the River Loxley flowing. So Danflass, more than the other reservoirs, is about keeping the levels at a reasonable level, shall we say, so that in summer when you get it dry, it's just the water from Danflass that is going to feed the River Loxley, not water from Agden, Dale Dyke and Strines, although I think that's a flexible situation as I understand it. But as far as I'm concerned, when you know that they are going to have a major wet event or a number of storms coming across the region over several days and several weeks, if the government mandates any private water company that's running these reservoirs you can mandate them to actually drop the levels, or you should be able to mandate them to drop the levels to create spare capacity and to use the reservoirs as a reservoir, as a reserve of water. So, for example, if 3 weeks ago every reservoir around here were made to drop their levels by, say, 2 or 3 metres, these reservoirs that have now been overflowing for several days may only just be starting to overflow now. And the water that you release to bring that level down was allowed to escape, and will be out kind of in the North Sea, 5, 6, 7, 8 days later, not flooding anywhere. It's already gone past Rotherham and Doncaster and out into the Humber and out into the North Sea. So it just seems that we have to be able to manage our water hardware, shall we say. If you look at the water itself as being software, then the water capacity, the reservoirs and everything else that we have to hold water, if we can manage those places better, then it seems that we can help to alleviate potential flooding events such as the one that we are now going through and probably going to go through, because this is forecast to be raining like this for the rest of this day, probably throughout tonight as well. And then tomorrow I think there's more showery weather coming in, and over the next few days it's going to be more sunshine and showers kind of thing, which when the ground is saturated and there's still going to be lots of water in the aquifers, in the hills, surrounding hills, etc., is just going to carry on adding to the problem. The sun's not strong enough in the sky yet, even if it comes out for several hours or several days, to really dry up the ground to any major extent. So once your soil becomes saturated, another reason why, if we can lower the levels of these reservoirs to give some extra capacity, we're talking literally, around Sheffield, we're talking literally hundreds of hectares of reservoir capacity, potentially. These other reservoirs as well further west, out Derbyshire, Lady Bower, Derwent, etc., etc. Although Derwent kind of staggers the Derbyshire-Sheffield boundary. So I've been saying it for years, but we really seriously need to look at being a bit more joined up in public and private sector in managing our water reserves, not just to give us water and drinking water, but to help alleviate other problems that climate change is going to bring, such as major flooding events. Because it costs nothing for Yorkshire Water to release every reservoir around Sheffield by 2 or 3 metres 5 to 10 days before a major weather event. But it costs a fortune to clear up after the flooding. It's a zero-sum game. It's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. You just need to make sure that you put in the mechanism, you put the mechanism in place that enables you to do what I've said with a great amount of confidence. As I say, you need to be confident that your weather forecast is as good as it can be for that 5 to 10 day, maybe even longer record. If there's any doubts, then leave it a little bit, down to 5 days, you firm it up, you say now we're at 90% chance that yes, there is potentially a lot of rain that's going to come over the Midlands area, the North and Midlands of England. And then you can start to release that water to create that extra capacity. So yeah, that was what I was going to get onto on my last video, but I ended up concentrating on trees and how trees in winter will actually I'm pretty certain will actually make flooding worse rather than better. So that's going to be controversial, so I look forward to hearing people's feedback on that. Okay, from a very wet Agden, and that leads down to that little arch bridge that you saw on my last video, so that's coming down into the village at Low Bradfield. Yeah, so from Agden on this lovely sunny day, I'll say bye for now.